Okay, we're live. Okay, so last week we talked about how to read a map, and that inevitably led into a discussion on Army organization. Okay, so some of us were getting confused in terms of, can we turn on those lights before I fall asleep? The lamps. The lamps, Louise. Okay. Oh, come on, Louise. Okay.
I'm working on.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, so remember, okay, we are capable. All right. So remember, I'm going to start at the very top with organization. All right. So the very top of Army organization is an Army group. And this organizational chart, basically I'm going to have about half of it because it won't fit on a single slide if I try to do the whole thing, or it would be too small. So remember, the 5 X's give away the fact that it is an Army group. If we go down the chain, also, you need to name things, right? So that when you look at a map, you understand who is who on the battlefield. Okay, so in this case, this is the 21st Army Group. All right, again, numbering is a mystery to me. Look it up if you would like to be interested, or if you want to teach me about that. Army, okay, is the next level down. That's given away by the 4 X's. So how many armies make up an Army group in this case? 2, okay, 2 do. Right? Sometimes you might have 3, 4, depends if you're German, British, or whatever, but in this case it would be 2, all right? And of course we're going to name those. So you have 1st Army and you have 2nd Army. You can have all sorts of them named however you please. Make sense? So now I'm going to branch off of this one right here. So whatever you see under here, you would see under this as well. Does that make sense? Sorry, I forgot the line. Was that directed at me or you just? Okay, all right. Okay, so then the next level down is corps. Okay, so you have, that's given away by the 3 X's. Okay, and in this case, this army is made up of 2 corps. All right, and we're going to name those 7th Corps and 5th Corps. Right, we saw that on the Omaha Beach map. Yes, or the Normandy, Invasion Normandy map.
Army group, like more than one country?
It can be, yes. So like in the Allied cause, yeah, you might have like a U.S. Army under it and a British Army. And you should have already started to get from the introductory reading that there is tension, particularly between the British and the Americans. Like they don't respect each other at all, especially early on. It changes a little bit as the war goes on. But that creates a very interesting dynamic for Eisenhower. Eisenhower, who was General Eisenhower? This is kind of from the reading, but that's okay. Tony? Or Tony? Why did I just call you that?
I don't know.
I apologize, Jamie. It's because Tony just asked me a question. That's why his name was stuck in my brain. So, who's Eisenhower?
So he was one of the generals in North Africa. He was also the president of the United States.
Eventually, yes. Like he was elected like in 1950. No, it was 52. He was elected in 1952. Yeah, he is actually in charge of everybody in North Africa. Like he's the supreme commander in the European theater. So you obviously need to know who he is. And it's interesting about him. What did you guys think of him as a leader from the reading?
He's not as good as Patton.
He's not as good as Patton. Okay, all right, we'll evaluate that. Okay, because Patton is very, bless you, lovable because he's like, don't come back, or if you should never come back. You should die on the battlefield. Like he's obviously full of a lot of pomp and whatever. He has like a siren on his half track as he rolls into town, just like say, I am here. Okay, but we'll address that a little bit. Eisenhower, like anybody, okay, I think when you're put into that position, struggles as a leader initially, okay, but eventually he does become, I think, a very, very good leader because he has to deal with so many prima donnas, okay? And I'm not just talking about Montgomery. Patton is a prima donna. Like crazy, okay? So it's all sorts of personalities. coming back to this. Okay, so corps make up an army. Then a corps is made up by approximately 3 divisions with the 2 X's. Then a division can be named 1st, 29th, 2nd, however you want. Underneath that, you have your regiments. All right, so I have 4 regiments making up a division here. And so obviously, if I had enough room, this would be made up of 4 regiments, this would be made up of 4 regiments, etc. Okay? All right, so you have the 501st, 502nd, 506th, 508th regiments, which each one of those are made up of battalions. Okay, so 2nd, 4th, 8th, 35th, I made up those numbers actually. Okay, and then underneath that, under battalions, those are made up of companies. Okay, so that's where you have Alpha, Bravo, Dog, Easy kind of companies. So what are companies made up of? Platoons. Okay, actually it's not Bravo, it's Baker in World War II terms. And Able for A. Okay, platoons are made up of squads, which are made up of teams, actually. So,
What's the acronym for this again?
come back right, something like that. I don't know.
Right now,
Danny Cortez.
Okay, come back right now, Danny Cortez.
Army.
Awesome. Okay, so any other questions on that? What do we remember about North Africa from Friday in terms of what I talked about? Just anything, just throw it out there. Hopefully remember something, huh? No, not necessarily the map, but what was actually happening in North Africa, starting back like in 1940. Sure, okay.
Germany had better technology.
They did a better technology. Good. Did I talk about that on Friday? A little bit? Okay, what else?
We talk about North Africa in the 1940s?
Yeah, we're talking about the World War II in North Africa in the 1940s.
Oh.
Or what do you remember that I talked about on Friday is another way to approach that. Yes.
The British were taking back their land from the Italians, and then Germany came in and said, okay, we'll help the Italians, and then Germany had their general come in, and then he pushed them way back, but he pushed them back too quickly, and then they pushed back too quickly. The Americans came in and then kind of double teamed them, and they were squished.
85% of that is accurate. Okay, here you go. All right, good. So basically, Evan gave us like a general trend of what was going on in North Africa. Okay, who invaded Africa first? Italy did. Okay, Italy did. They actually already had colonized Libya, and they attacked into Egypt first. Who was kind of protecting? All right, the British, okay? And the Egyptians and people in the Middle East would say, no, they're not really protecting us, they're just occupying us. But the British were there. Initially, the Italians make some progress, not very far. Then the British are able to counterattack, all right, and pull them back to El Agahila, all right, which the British are feeling very confident until who shows up? You said General. Let's give a name to it. General Rommel, all right, and the German Africa Corps show up and push the British all the way back almost to the Suez Canal, all right, which is critical, right, because remember there's oil in the Middle East. And what was the key battle that stopped that eastward German advance that you should remember? The Battle of El Alamein, all right, and the British are able to push back towards the middle of Africa. In the meantime, as the British are pushing back, who's landing out on the western side of Africa, particularly in Morocco? Okay, the Americans are, okay, with some British help as well. Okay, Operation Torch is that operation. Okay, so initially things didn't go well. I mean, we were successful, but a big reason for that is we were facing who were we facing when we landed in Morocco? Were we facing the Germans? We were facing the French. Okay, because remember, they're technically allies with Germany at this point. They fight against us for a period of time, some valiantly, okay, but eventually they surrender and the French become allied with us. So for a very short period of time, we're fighting the French. Okay, so that's the general trend. I want you to watch this video. This is going to give you some more specificity. Some of you actually already completed the checkpoint. which you got ahead of the game, which I appreciate that. And one of you asked me, I want to learn about more battles, which we're certainly going to do besides El Guitar. And this is going to start to talk a little bit about that. Okay? So if you want to take out your Chromebooks to jot down some notes, I think that would be wise to do that. Yes?
I would get mine.
Yes. Always bring it to class.
Cars? I like those Legos. So, Brett, did you just buy those Legos?
Quickly, break them out. Where's your Chromebook?
What'd you say, Brett?
No, I'm playing with the glow stick right now. Why?
It's darker.
That's true. Okay, so we talked about this last week, right? That North Africa, this comes from your reading, North Africa was a pivot point in American history, the place where the United States began to act like a great power, military, diplomatically, strategically, tactically. Obviously, you'll see at the beginning, we were not acting like a great power, but that will change eventually. Okay, so we're going to stop there. That movie clip, we'll pick up actually a little bit later with that. So what's going on? What's striking about that clip? Talk to me about it. Show me that you've learned something from that clip. Okay, American got dominated. Very good. What else? They didn't know how to fight. Read.
My question is,
Yes.
did we have any trained U.S. forces at that time? Because it seems every video we watch is the same thing, but we weren't trained.
Yeah, well, we were trained. We went through training. But, I mean, remember, go back to some of the earlier videos. Like, how well prepared was the United States for war? Not well. I mean, some of the times they're not even using actual weapons in their training exercises initially. So, but they were trained. Like, they had gone through training. We had been to war before. But what was the problem? This is a good question. Yes, Luke. They hadn't been in battle. They had an experience. When you look at a lot of battles and how they get started, typically like that happens. Like when Germany invades France, the British didn't perform that great. They got pushed all the way back to Dunkirk. They'd be evacuated across the Channel, etc. But by this point in the war, they're good fighters. And Montgomery's arrogant. Okay, but he made the same assessment of American troops at that time. Like, look, I mean, I think actually it was General Anderson who made that comment, who was kind of in charge of all British forces. But, I mean, we weren't doing well, all right? And that was scary in 1941, 42, 43, for the rest of the world. Like, are the Americans actually going to contribute well here? Yes.
Like, were there any veteran forces that we had who had been in war before?
I mean, we had some World War I veterans, yeah. But, again, remember, World War I, we weren't involved in that war very long. Like, we declared war, I think it was 1916. We sent troops over 1917-ish, and the war was over in 19... We actually fought for maybe a year, I think a little bit less. So we had, the Big Red One, the 1st Infantry Division, really made its name over in Europe. But, but they didn't have, Britain and Germany, they fought from 1914 to 1918. They had a good 4 years of war. And then even at this point, they've been fighting from 1939 up to 1942. So I think experience. The other piece of it, what was another reason why we struggled? Yeah, leadership was pretty bad. Okay, and there are some good ones out there. Okay, but when you have, for example, General Frendenhall in charge, it just wasn't a good mix. Plus, we weren't working with the British very well. I mean, it was another reason why it wasn't working out. So, and there's a technology piece as well. So again, I mean, we had some great troops in terms of you guys read about in the Battle of El Guitar reading who did well right before the battle. Okay, what unit struck out and really dominated the Italians one night? Someone who, huh?
Oh, I know this.
Yeah, you know this one. Okay, all right. There were some U.S. troops that were called Rangers. They're still around today. They're specially trained, hardcore troops. They're led by their commander, Darby is his name, and they're very effective. Okay, so it wasn't like everybody in the whole U.S. Army was wanting to run away. Okay, but it was still tough. The Germans are good at what they do. Yes.
What was the disorder they were talking about that those spiders did have?
Particularly, and this is going to get to the next slide. Let me skip here. They're particularly talking about the Battle of Kasserine Pass there, and I'm going to actually show you a video that gives a little bit more detail in terms of why that happened. I think a big reason why we were so bad at Kasserine Pass was leadership. Okay. I have the reasons why. It's partially our leadership. It's partially actually a technology issue with code breaking. It's also partly with overconfidence and a bunch of things. So we'll come back to that. Okay. Now that gives you a taste of what it was like. What were some key battles leading up to El Guitar? One, okay, was Majez al-Bab. All right, which I'm really good at pronouncing this stuff. Okay, basically, this town is considered. If you capture this town, you're going to have a much easier road to where? Look at the map. Where do you think you're going to head next? Tunis. Remember, that's the ultimate goal here for the Allies, to get to Tunis. Now, one thing, what is the terrain like in North Africa from what you have seen so far? Very deserty with what? Big, huge things that we're not familiar with in the Midwest. Mountains, okay, and hills. Okay, particularly mountains. And so you can't really tell on this map, but there's two dorsal, they call them there's like the eastern dorsal, and then there's the western dorsal mountains that kind of funnel things up towards Tunis. So it really limits the routes you can take to get there. Okay, you're going to see some snippets from the video of like these hills just being bombarded. Okay, because a lot of times the Germans would dig in on these hills and it was extremely difficult to root them out. And vice versa if the Germans were counterattacking us. So initially we capture this. Actually, the British capture it, but then the Germans push back. This is in November of 1942. Remember, El Guitar is when? I'm not typically big on dates, but I'm big on months and years. No?
February.
Closer, March. Okay,
March 16th.
of 1943. Okay, so this is leading up to it, right? So, however, the Germans stop us here. They also stop us at Longstop Hill. All right, it's actually misleading. There are actually two hills there, but from the British and American perspective, it only looked like one. Which when we took the first one, we're like, yes, awesome, we took this. And they're like, oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch of Germans right over there on that next hill. And they pushed us off of Longstop Hill. And back and forth. It actually goes on beyond December 22nd through Christmas. Rains are pouring down. This was another reason why we got bogged down. Okay, because in North Africa around this time, there's heavy, heavy rains, which is something that we had to deal with. The weather plays a huge role in World War II. Just a little bit. Okay, so we'll come back to that, particularly with D-Day and Bulge. Yes.
Was it in the game? Weather?
Only in terms of dust, actually, because it was very dry during the time. Well, I don't know how dry, but it was. There isn't rain during the battle. But we're not going to have anything for that dynamic. Okay, but we will for later battles. Okay, so those are two key battles that really stop our push from west to east. Okay, Casablanca starts in January of 1914. We talked a little bit about that. All right. Some quotes here that I think give you a sense of why this is so important. And remember, the author said this is one huge reason why Africa is important in general. Okay, the elimination of German, Japanese, and Italian war power means the unconditional surrender of Germany, Italy, and Japan. It does not mean the destruction of the population of Germany, Italy, or Japan, but it does mean the destruction of the philosophies in those countries, which are based on conquest and subjugation of other people. This is Churchill and FDR speaking. Now think from the opposite perspective. If you're Italian, if you are German, if you are Japanese, and you see this, okay, how are you going to react to something like this? That they want to destroy our philosophies of life.
Who do you think you are?
Okay, who do you think you are? Luis, in our conversation the other day, asked a great question. Do you remember what you asked? It's too bad because it was really, really good. Okay. What is your perspective if you are German? If these are the terms that are being dictated by the Allies, how are you going to react to that?
You're going to fight harder.
Why?
Because now you're fighting for your country.
You're fighting for your way of life.
Yeah.
Luis said, why would I even surrender?
There you go, Luis!
There you go. So this has huge ramifications, right? The Japanese fight to the death. Hitler fights to the death. Okay? And so freeze. So you want to ask yourself, what if we hadn't done this? Okay? We'll pick up there tomorrow.